Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and tonight's video is going to be a direct discussion surrounding Ubisoft and a recent statement they made regarding loot boxes, and I'm also going to be picking on one particular games journalist that is somewhat defending them. However, as a general rule, I like to present the topic being discussed in an unbiased fashion as possible and showcase all of the facts present while injecting as little of my own opinion as humanly possible and then providing my take on things. As always, links to any sources used, along with links to my social media, Patreon, and Discord are in the description down below. Now, I know I've talked about loot boxes so many times on this channel I will most likely sound like a broken record at this point, but Ubisoft have had another Ubisoft moment, and let me show you what I mean. I was pointed to this article on segmentnext.com written by Sikander Mahmoud, my apologies if I pronounced that wrong, titled Ubisoft Rightfully Blames Gamers for Loot Boxes in Video Games, which, despite the inflammatory nature of the article's title, we will circle back to it in just a moment. This article discussed a recent post on the Steam discussion forums for the game Trials Rising, a motorcycle and motocross racing game by the looks of things. This statement was posted by Warlock, a Ubisoft developer for the game. The statement that Warlock made was in response to the thread posted by the Steam user My Team Sucks, in which they stated loot boxes confirmed in Trials Rising, screw Ubisoft, and red links. Now, in Warlock's posting, they stated that the loot crates for the game will be cosmetic only, stating if players don't like them, they can choose not to buy them. They continued to say that the cosmetics are there for people who want to stand out from the crowd while playing online, or fans who want to support the game or Ubisoft even further. Warlock continued by stating that yes, this will mean that some people will pay more into the game than others, that this will result in increased profits, and that those profits help Ubisoft put more money into new titles. They also state that if people did not buy loot boxes, they wouldn't be added into future games, and also stated that loot boxes are not bad if implemented correctly. And going back to the article, the writer did a decent job of relating the statements Warlock made, and he also, for the most part, agreed with Warlock's statements. He also reiterated in the article the fact that Belgium has already declared loot boxes to be gambling and in violation of their laws, and also that other governments are investigating companies like Electronic Arts and Take-Two Interactive for their predatory monetizations. Sikander Mahmoud also stated in the article, quote, loot boxes are just additional cosmetics you can get with money, and many publishers are moving to mobile development due to better monetization opportunities. Meanwhile, the community is criticizing loot boxes and popular IPs shifting to mobile. And this is purely conjecture, but I would expect that last statement was made in regards to the recent controversy surrounding Activision Blizzard and their announcement of the mobile game Diablo Immortal currently being developed by NetEase. So those are the facts that we're working with, and in order for me to properly formulate my own thoughts here, we first have to break this down into a couple of different segments. First, we have the concept of pay-to-win versus cosmetics, and then we have the loot boxes themselves and what they entail, and then we also have those last two statements made by the writer of the article. Loot boxes are just additional cosmetics you can get with money, and publishers are moving development to mobile. And I think that will give us a good basis to work from here. So to start with our first bullet point here, and bear with me because that's all I have in front of me is my list of bullet points, pay-to-win versus cosmetics. Now, we've all seen what can happen when you introduce pay-to-win loot boxes. Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA was a prime example of what can happen with an extremely beloved franchise that has been given the Electronic Arts loot box treatment to the point where the future of Star Wars games with EA were rumored to be in jeopardy. We also saw it with Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, where they had first implemented an imposing grind on the game and a direct pay-to-win game mechanic that the design of the game forced the player to deal with in order to get the quote-unquote true ending of a story that was so unfaithful to the Tolkien lore and characters as to essentially become a bastardization. The developers of that game eventually removed the loot boxes and were forced to release a massive patch that rebalanced the game in order to make up for the lack of their predatory monetization scheme. A similar rebalance that notably Electronic Arts was also forced to implement with Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA when they removed their pay-to-win loot boxes. And that distinction of those rebalances being required after the loot boxes were removed is an important one, as it does point out that these developers deliberately designed the game in order to promote their purchases, that these were not simple if you feel like it systems, that the games were designed around them at a key fundamental level. But that's with pay-to-win games. Now, what about cosmetic only? There are plenty of video games out in the world that base their entire economy off of cosmetic loot boxes, CSGO and PUBG being two examples of non-closed systems that take advantage of the gambling loot box sales, key sales, and third-party skin gambling that their monetary systems actually promote. Also, we have closed loot box skin economies as well, like the kind implemented by Activision Blizzard in games like Overwatch, where skins cannot be actively traded or sold with other people. Now, a lot of people find this distinction important, as Overwatch's loot box system is quote-unquote doing it right, and that is something I disagree with on a fundamental level. You see, many people have different thresholds for what they deem to be unacceptable. For some, it's pay-to-win loot boxes. For others, it's loot boxes in general, and then there are some that deem them perfectly acceptable, even benign, no matter where they are or what they're done with. And I personally deem any loot boxes to be predatory, manipulative, and unacceptable. The reason why is quite simple. First, let's lay aside the concept of gambling for a moment. The flashing lights, the explosions and fireworks, and all the other manipulative elements at play that help make loot boxes even more predatory than what they already were previously. Let's take a look at loot boxes at their core, what they actually are after laying all of that aside. And they are, for all intents and purposes, once you get rid of all of the pomp and circumstance surrounding them, they're a shell game. They take an inventory of items, whether they be cosmetic or no, and implement a randomization factor that absolutely ensures that the vast majority of people will have to spend far more money attempting to obtain the items that they want than they otherwise would. It's even been surmised that in some systems, Dota 2 is a good example owing to the changes they made to their loot box system to comply with Belgian law, that the outcomes of the loot boxes are not random at all, and their contents are determined before the loot box is opened and possibly before it's even purchased or obtained. And the reason why I want that made clear in no uncertain terms, that loot boxes are a shell game where the developers can and sometimes do control the outcome outside of the randomization factor, is because regardless of gameplay effect or not, loot boxes themselves are and always have been a needless predation on gamers. And also, it very much leads into the statement that was made by that journalist. Loot boxes are just additional cosmetics you can get with money. No, I disagree with that completely. Cosmetic microtransactions, direct purchase microtransactions in this case, is additional cosmetics you can get with money. Loot boxes take those microtransactions and shove them into a shell game, and that is something I'm not okay with. Microtransactions themselves, cosmetic only, can be acceptable to me if they don't make use of gambling mechanics. And also, to add an additional caveat there, any microtransactions that cost $1 or more is no longer micro, as it represents a significant percentage of the base cost of the game. To me, cosmetic microtransactions should never exceed $1, with the vast majority of them costing 5 cents, 10, or even 25. Not so microtransactions are deemed acceptable much in the same way as loot boxes are, because that is determined by what the majority of people are willing to pay. And then we also have that last statement about games publishers moving their IPs over to mobile. Now, the reason for this is that the mobile market is already inundated with terribly anti-consumer practices, and games developers and publishers can invest a fraction of the development for a traditional game and be able to monetize it to a far greater degree. And therein lies the problem. We've seen it over the years with countless development companies and publishers. Video games were at one time both a business and an expression of creativity, sometimes even being elevated to the point where certain games could be considered a work of art. But now, especially with systems like loot boxes, video games have become far more about the business aspect and the focus on sheer profits than they are about the expression of creativity, about the art, and about the entertainment factor. And through all of it, it is made ever more painfully obvious that these game developers and publishers like Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Electronic Arts, and Activision Blizzard have long ago lost sight of earning profits by creating a good and entertaining product and have instead focused on the bottom line with laser precision, doing whatever they can to maximize profits while decreasing expenditures and effort to a frightening degree. But as always, please do let me know what you think about all of this down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.